What if I told you that one small nation, surrounded by mountains and sea, shaped the way we think, govern, create art, and even dream today? This is not just history. It's the unforgettable story of ancient Greece, the civilization that refused to be forgotten. Before we dive into the untold story of ancient Greece, make sure to hit subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Together, let's keep history alive. When we speak of ancient Greece, we often imagine marble temples, wise philosophers, and bustling city-states like Athens. Yet the true beginning of this remarkable civilization lies far earlier, in a time when myths and reality blurred together, and when geography itself shaped the destiny of a people. Greece was never a single wide plain like Egypt or Mesopotamia. Instead, it was a land broken into sharp mountains, narrow valleys, and countless islands scattered across the Aegean Sea. This geography mattered. It kept communities separated, encouraging them to grow independently. Villages nestled in valleys often became proud city-states, each with its own traditions, dialects, and ways of life. But the sea, always nearby, connected them. From the earliest days, the Greeks were sailors. They learned to build sturdy ships, not for conquest, but for survival, for trade, for fishing, and for exploration. The Aegean Sea was their highway, and it gave them a chance to meet other civilizations far beyond their rocky homeland. Long before Athens and Sparta existed, two earlier cultures prepared the stage for what we now call Greek civilization. On the island of Crete, the Minoans built a society that was vibrant, artistic, and mysterious. They created sprawling palaces like Knossos, decorated with vivid frescoes of dolphins, dancers, and sacred bulls. Their writing system, still not fully understood, whispers to us from clay tablets. The Minoans were great traders, reaching Egypt and the Near East, and their culture influenced the myths that later Greeks would cherish, such as the story of King Minos and the labyrinth of the Minotaur. On the mainland, another people rose, the Mycenaeans. They were builders of strong fortresses with walls so massive that later generations believed giants must have raised them. The Mycenaeans spoke an early form of Greek, and from them we gain our first glimpses of the heroes later immortalized in epic poetry: Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus. Their society was shaped by both trade and warfare, but more importantly, it left behind legends that gave Greece its first shared cultural identity. Perhaps the most famous tale from this early age is the Trojan War. Whether it happened as told or not, it served as a cultural anchor for the Greeks. Singers known as bards carried the story of Troy across generations, weaving together myth and memory into what later became the Iliad and the Odyssey. Imagine a world where history was not written down, but sung in verse by firelight. Through these songs, scattered communities of Greece, isolated by mountains and sea, could feel connected. They all knew the story of Troy. They all knew the wrath of Achilles and the journey of Odysseus. In this way, myth became the first glue that held the Greek world together. Around 1200 BCE, the Mycenaean palaces fell. Historians still debate why, perhaps natural disasters, invasions, or social unrest. What followed is often called the Greek Dark Age, a time when great cities declined, writing disappeared, and life seemed to retreat into small, simple communities. Yet this was not the end. Even in obscurity, the Greeks preserved their spirit. Farmers still cultivated olives and grapes, sailors still navigated the seas, and bards still sang the tales of heroes. Out of this quiet resilience, a new beginning slowly formed. By the 8th century BCE, the Greeks had adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet, creating their own system of writing. This breakthrough was revolutionary. No longer would their myths live only in song. They could now be written and preserved. With writing, laws could be recorded, trade could be organized, and ideas could travel farther than any ship. The beginning of Greece, then, was not one single event but a series of quiet transformations. Geography shaped their independence. The Minoans and Mycenaeans gave them culture and myth. The memory of Troy gave them a shared story. The collapse forced them to start anew, and the adoption of writing gave them a tool to express their growing identity. By the end of this period, the Greeks were ready to emerge from obscurity. They were no longer just scattered villages by the sea. They were becoming a people with a voice, a culture that would one day echo across the world. When the curtain of the Dark Age slowly lifted, Greece revealed something extraordinary, a civilization ready not only to survive, but to flourish. What followed became known as the Classical Age, a period when the Greeks carved their names into history with art, politics, philosophy, and a vision of human potential that still inspires us today. The true heartbeat of classical Greece was the polis, or city-state. Unlike great kingdoms ruled by powerful monarchs, Greece grew through independent communities, each proud of its autonomy. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each polis was unique, with its own laws, traditions, and ambitions. This independence often led to rivalry, but it also nurtured creativity. The polis became a laboratory of ideas. Citizens debated, argued, and voted in public assemblies. Farmers, artisans, merchants, and warriors all felt part of a collective identity that stretched beyond family ties. Among the many city-states, Athens stood out. Here, in the 5th century BCE, the idea of democracy was born. It was not democracy as we know it today. Only free male citizens could vote, but it was revolutionary. Decisions about war, trade, and law were made not by kings, but by ordinary citizens gathered in the assembly. Athens also became the stage for philosophy and the arts. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked questions that still echo in classrooms and conversations today. What is justice? What is the good life? How should we govern ourselves? At the same time, Athens celebrated human expression through drama and theater. The tragedies of Sophocles and the comedies of Aristophanes were performed before thousands of citizens, exploring the joys and sorrows of human existence. While Athens celebrated freedom of thought, Sparta took another road. Nestled in the Peloponnesian Peninsula, Sparta valued discipline, order, and military strength. Its citizens were trained from childhood to serve the state, creating one of the most formidable armies of the ancient world. Though their approach was harsh, Sparta contributed to Greek identity in another way: unity in times of danger. When powerful empires threatened Greece, the discipline of Sparta and the creativity of Athens would stand side by side. That test came in the early 5th century BCE, when the mighty Persian Empire sought to conquer Greece. Against overwhelming odds, the city-states came together. At battles like Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea, they proved that a small divided land could resist one of the greatest empires of its time. These victories became a source of pride and confidence. Greece had defended its independence, and now it stood ready to embrace an age of cultural brilliance. After the Persian Wars, Athens entered what is often called its Golden Age. Under the leadership of Pericles, the city blossomed. The Parthenon, a temple dedicated to Athena, rose on the Acropolis, its marble columns gleaming in the sunlight. Artists like Phidias sculpted works that captured both the strength and grace of the human form. In marketplaces, citizens debated politics and philosophy. In theaters, new plays explored questions of fate, honor, and morality. In academies, mathematics, science, and history took shape as disciplines to be studied, not just stories to be told. What made the classical age remarkable was not just its buildings or battles, but its belief in the power of the human mind. The Greeks celebrated the idea that humans could question, reason, and shape their own destiny. They asked, what makes a society just? How do we measure beauty? What is truth? These questions, born in the Agora of Athens, would later travel across centuries to inspire thinkers, leaders, and dreamers around the world. Yet even as Athens grew in glory, rivalry with Sparta deepened. Each city-state believed its way of life was superior, and the balance between cooperation and conflict began to tilt. The unity that had defeated Persia was fragile, and soon Greece would face a crisis from within. No civilization grows in complete isolation. Greece, with its mountains and seas, was always open to the winds of influence that blew across the Mediterranean. From trade routes and traveling scholars to wars and diplomacy, the Greeks absorbed ideas, adapted them, and made them their own. These influences did not weaken Greece. They enriched it, giving rise to a culture that became greater than the sum of its parts. Long before Greek philosophers debated in the agora, Egyptian priests studied the stars, measured the land, and built monuments that reached for the heavens. Greek travelers, curious and eager to learn, journeyed to Egypt. From Egypt they gained knowledge of mathematics, medicine, and astronomy. The great thinker Thales of Miletus, often called the first philosopher, was said to have learned in Egypt how to measure the height of a pyramid using its shadow. Greek art also borrowed from Egypt. Early statues, known as kouroi, stand rigid and symmetrical, echoing the style of Egyptian sculpture before evolving into a freer, more natural form. If the Egyptians offered wisdom, the Phoenicians offered tools. Great sailors and traders, the Phoenicians introduced the Greeks to a writing system. The Greeks adapted it, adding vowels, and in doing so created the Greek alphabet, a foundation not only for their own literature but for much of Western writing that followed. The Phoenicians also spread goods and ideas across the seas. Through trade, the Greeks encountered exotic products, new technologies, and distant stories that broadened their worldview. Every amphora of olive oil exchanged in a foreign port was also an exchange of culture. Perhaps no outside power influenced Greece as profoundly as Persia. The Persian Empire was vast, stretching from Asia Minor to India. To the Greeks, Persia represented both a threat and a mirror. The Persian invasions of Greece tested the unity of the city-states, but they also forced the Greeks to define themselves. In resisting Persia, they came to see freedom and independence as central values. The contrast was striking. The Persians ruled through kings and satraps, while the Greeks prized their assemblies and citizen voices. Yet, even in conflict, cultural exchange occurred. Greek art, for example, borrowed motifs from Persia. Greek soldiers brought back not only stories of battles, but also glimpses of the wealth and organization of the Persian court. Beyond great empires, everyday trade also shaped Greece. The Mediterranean was a crossroads where merchants from Africa, Asia, and Europe met. Spices, textiles, metals, and stories flowed through Greek harbors. A young sailor from Athens might hear tales of distant lands. A potter in Corinth might decorate a vase with patterns inspired by foreign designs. These influences reminded the Greeks that they were part of a wider world. Their gods, too, sometimes bore the echoes of foreign deities. The goddess Aphrodite, for example, may have origins in the Near Eastern goddess Ishtar. What made Greece remarkable was not just what it borrowed, but what it transformed. From Egypt's science, they built philosophy. From Phoenicia's alphabet, they built literature. From Persia's challenge, they built a sense of identity. Each influence became a stepping stone, not a shadow. By absorbing and reshaping the ideas of others, the Greeks forged a culture that was both local and universal. Thus, the story of Greece is not just the story of one people, but of a dialogue across seas and centuries. The Greeks were listeners as well as speakers, students as well as teachers. Their genius lay in turning borrowed fragments into something entirely new. After absorbing the wisdom of neighboring civilizations, Greece entered a new period of energy and ambition. This was not only a time of artistic brilliance, but also of growth in politics, trade, science, and technology. From the 8th to the 5th century BCE, the Greeks expanded their horizons, establishing colonies, experimenting with new systems of government, and advancing knowledge in ways that would echo far beyond their shores. The mountains of Greece limited farmland, but the sea offered opportunity. By the 7th century BCE, Greek sailors began to establish colonies across the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Settlements appeared in Sicily, southern Italy, North Africa, and Asia Minor. These colonies were not mere outposts. They were thriving communities connected by trade and culture. A Greek traveler could leave his home in Corinth, sail west, and find a familiar marketplace in Syracuse or Naples. Greek pottery, language, and customs spread, while local traditions mixed into the Greek way of life. Colonization not only relieved population pressures but also turned Greece into a networked civilization, with ideas traveling as quickly as ships. With colonies came wealth. Olive oil, wine, and pottery became staples of Mediterranean trade. Greek craftsmen refined techniques in metalwork and sculpture, producing goods admired far beyond their borders. Markets in Athens and Corinth buzzed with merchants offering products from every corner of the known world. This prosperity encouraged the rise of a new social class, merchants and artisans, whose voices began to challenge the dominance of aristocratic families. Slowly, this economic shift laid the groundwork for political experimentation, including the rise of democracy. Growth was not only measured in wealth, but also in governance. While monarchies still existed in some regions, many city-states began experimenting with new forms of rule. Tyrants, leaders who seized power, sometimes brought stability and reforms, but over time, systems became more balanced. Athens, as we saw in the classical age, took the bold step toward democracy. Citizens, though limited in definition, could vote, debate, and hold office. Other city-states developed councils or assemblies that gave ordinary people a voice. This was a remarkable experiment in human governance, one that would inspire generations to come. Greek thinkers were not content to inherit wisdom, they sought to expand it. In the 6th century BCE, Pythagoras explored mathematics, linking numbers to the harmony of the universe. Hippocrates studied medicine, seeking natural causes for illness instead of blaming the gods. In astronomy, thinkers looked at the heavens with curiosity rather than fear. Some even suggested the earth was round, a daring thought for its time. By asking questions and seeking evidence, the Greeks laid the foundations of science as a discipline. Growth was also expressed through beauty. The Greeks developed architectural styles, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, that combined strength with elegance. Temples rose across city-states, each one reflecting civic pride and devotion to the gods. Sculptors moved beyond rigid forms, capturing movement and emotion in marble. The human body became a subject of admiration, celebrated as a reflection of balance and proportion. As colonies flourished, trade expanded, and knowledge grew, Greece became more than a collection of villages. It became a civilization with global significance. Others began to notice. The Persians respected and feared Greek independence. The Egyptians exchanged knowledge with Greek travelers. Rome, still young, looked across the sea at a culture to be admired. This era of growth brought confidence but also tension. As city-states grew wealthier, rivalries sharpened. Athens, Corinth, and Sparta all sought influence. Unity was fragile, and the same competitive spirit that fueled innovation also planted the seeds of future conflict. Every civilization, no matter how great, faces moments of hardship. For Greece, the very independence and rivalry that had once fueled creativity also led to conflict, poverty, and political turmoil. This was the age when the bright flame of the classical world flickered under the weight of crisis. As Athens rose to wealth and power after the Persian Wars, it built the Delian League, an alliance meant to protect Greece from future invasions. But soon, Athens began using the League as its own empire, collecting tribute and enforcing loyalty. Sparta, proud and suspicious, could not accept Athenian dominance. Two visions of Greece now stood opposed: Athens with its democracy, culture, and naval power, and Sparta with its discipline, order, and mighty army. The rivalry grew until it could no longer be contained. In 431 BCE, Athens and Sparta, along with their allies, plunged into what became known as the Peloponnesian War. For nearly 3 decades, the Greek world was torn apart. The war was not only fought with spears and ships, but also with blockades, shifting alliances, and political betrayals. Athens suffered from plague, Sparta struggled with resources, and smaller city-states were caught in the middle. When the war finally ended in 404 BCE, Sparta emerged as the victor, but Greece as a whole was weakened. Fields had been ruined, treasuries drained, and trust between city-states shattered. With war came poverty. Farmers struggled to rebuild, trade routes were disrupted, and many citizens found themselves in debt. Once bustling markets grew quiet, and the proud independence of the polis felt more fragile than ever. Some Greeks turned to mercenary life, hiring themselves out to foreign armies. Others sought stability by supporting tyrants who promised order. The golden days of prosperity seemed like a distant memory. Democracy, too, was tested. In Athens, the war and its aftermath brought moments of doubt. Was democracy too weak in times of crisis? Some citizens supported oligarchies or strong leaders who promised swift action. Others clung to the ideals of open debate and citizen rule. This struggle revealed the fragility of human systems. The very experiment that had made Athens famous could crumble under the weight of war and poverty. Even as politics faltered, Greek culture tried to endure. Playwrights like Euripides and Aristophanes wrote works that captured the anxieties of the age, tragedies that mourned loss, and comedies that mocked corruption. Philosophers continued to ask questions, but their voices were often drowned out by the clash of armies. The crises of this period revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of Greek civilization. Independence had brought creativity, but also division. Pride in the polis gave citizens identity, but it also made unity nearly impossible. Greece, once admired for its resilience, now seemed vulnerable. And beyond its borders, new powers watched with interest, sensing that the fractured Greek world might one day be theirs to claim. After years of war and political instability, Greece seemed destined to fade into decline. Yet history had other plans. In the northern lands of Macedonia, a new force was rising, one that would modernize Greek politics, military power, and culture. This era was marked by innovation, transformation, and expansion, carrying Greece into a new chapter of its story. For centuries, Macedonia had been considered a distant, less sophisticated neighbor of the southern city-states. But under King Philip II, Macedonia redefined itself. Philip reorganized his army, introducing the phalanx with longer spears that gave his soldiers unprecedented strength in battle. He also used diplomacy, marriage alliances, and strategy to unite the fractured Greek states under his influence. By the time of his death, Greece was no longer a patchwork of rival city-states. It was on the verge of becoming part of a broader, unified vision. Into this moment stepped Philip's son, Alexander, later known as the Great. Brilliant, ambitious, and inspired by both Greek ideals and Macedonian strength, Alexander carried Greece beyond its borders. Though still young, he studied under Aristotle, who filled his mind with philosophy, science, and the love of Greek culture. But Alexander was not only a student, he was a conqueror. With unmatched energy, he led armies across Asia Minor, Egypt, Persia, and as far as India. His campaigns spread Greek language, art, and ideas into lands that had never known them before. At the same time, he absorbed influences from the cultures he encountered, blending East and West in a way the world had never seen. With Alexander's conquests, a new age dawned, the Hellenistic period. Greek culture was no longer confined to Athens, Sparta, or Corinth. It now flourished in great cities like Alexandria in Egypt, which became a center of learning, home to the legendary Library of Alexandria. Science, mathematics, and engineering reached new heights. Euclid wrote his work on geometry, still studied today. Archimedes made discoveries in physics and mechanics that would inspire inventors for centuries. In medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, Greek thinkers continued to push the boundaries of knowledge. The new Greek world was also more connected. Trade routes linked the Mediterranean to the Middle East and beyond. Markets in Greek cities offered goods from India, Egypt, and Central Asia. This prosperity allowed new classes of people, merchants, scholars, and artisans, to thrive. Politically, monarchies became more common, as Alexander's empire was divided among his generals after his death. Though city-states still existed, they were now part of a larger, interconnected world. This period of modernization gave Greece a new identity. No longer just a land of independent cities, it became part of a vast cultural sphere that stretched across continents. The Greeks did not lose themselves in this process. They reinvented themselves, proving that their ideas could travel, adapt, and endure. Though Alexander's empire did not last forever, the cultural impact did. Greek became the language of learning, diplomacy, and trade across much of the known world. Greek art and architecture influenced distant lands, and Greek philosophy inspired rulers and thinkers for generations. The modernization of Greece was not about abandoning the past, but about carrying it forward, transforming the lessons of the classical age into something even broader and more lasting. By the time the Hellenistic age unfolded, Greece was no longer a hidden corner of the Mediterranean. Its influence stretched across continents, shaping empires, inspiring thinkers, and planting seeds that would grow for thousands of years. The legacy of Greece was not only in temples and statues, but in ideas so powerful that they became part of the world's shared heritage. Perhaps the clearest sign of Greece's legacy can be seen in Rome. The Romans conquered Greece militarily, but Greece conquered Rome culturally. Roman poets studied Homer. Roman philosophers walked in the footsteps of Plato and Aristotle. Roman architects borrowed Greek columns and styles, blending them into their own grand structures. The saying became famous: "Captive Greece captured her conqueror." In other words, though Rome ruled politically, it was Greece that ruled intellectually and artistically. Greek philosophy became the cornerstone of Western thought. Socrates taught the value of questioning. Plato explored justice and the ideal state. Aristotle built systems of logic, science, and ethics that shaped learning for centuries. These ideas were not locked in the past. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, they were rediscovered, studied, and celebrated again, forming the basis of modern philosophy and science. The democratic experiment of Athens may have been limited in its time, but its spirit endured. The concept that citizens should have a voice in government inspired political thinkers throughout history. From the Roman Republic to modern democracies, the echoes of Athens can be heard in assemblies, parliaments, and congresses around the world. Greek contributions to science and mathematics remain foundational. Euclid's geometry, Pythagoras' theorem, and Hippocrates' medical principles are still studied today. Greek astronomers like Hipparchus mapped the stars, while others proposed early models of the solar system. These achievements demonstrated a new way of thinking, seeking natural explanations instead of relying only on myth. This rational spirit became the root of scientific inquiry across cultures. In art, the Greek emphasis on harmony, proportion, and human beauty influenced generations of artists. Renaissance painters and sculptors, centuries later, looked back to Greece for inspiration. In theater, the tragedies and comedies of ancient Athens created a blueprint for drama. From Shakespeare to modern cinema, the themes of fate, conflict, love, and laughter trace their lineage to the stage of the Greek amphitheater. Greek influence did not end with Rome. Through trade, conquest, and learning, Greek culture became a bridge between civilizations. It traveled eastward into the Islamic world, where scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek texts in medicine, philosophy, and mathematics. It traveled westward into Europe, becoming the foundation of education, politics, and art. What makes Greece's role unique is that its legacy is not bound by geography or by the centuries in which it thrived. Greece became larger than itself. Its ideas transformed into a universal heritage. To this day, when we speak of democracy, philosophy, theater, or science, we are speaking in a language first shaped by Greece. The story of ancient Greece does not end in marble ruins or in yellowed scrolls locked away in libraries. It continues, quietly, steadily, woven into the daily lives of billions of people who may not even realize they are walking in the footsteps of the Greeks. This is the paradox of Greece's heritage. It is both ancient and alive, both a memory and a presence. To understand its future, we must first understand the ways in which Greece's past continues to breathe in our present. Travelers who walk among the stones of the Parthenon in Athens often feel a peculiar silence. The marble columns, though battered by time and war, still stand with a dignity that transcends centuries. They are ruins, yes, but they are not dead. They whisper stories of democracy's birth, of festivals in honor of Athena, of architects who sought perfection not in size but in balance. These ruins are not only for tourists with cameras. They are places of memory for Greeks themselves, reminders that their identity is rooted in something larger than the boundaries of the modern state. Each stone is both fragile and eternal, holding together the weight of history. If the ruins speak through stone, Greek heritage also speaks through language. Words such as philosophy, democracy, theater, cosmos, logic, and ethics come directly from Greek. They are not only words, but worlds, gateways to ideas that continue to shape how we think about ourselves and our societies. Consider the very alphabet you are reading now. It was shaped in part by the Greek alphabet, which gave rise to the Latin script. Every letter carries an echo of that innovation, a reminder that Greece's contributions were not ornamental but structural, forming the very framework of global communication. Step into any classroom today, whether in Europe, Asia, or the Americas, and you will still see the shadow of Greek traditions. The idea that education should not only train skills but also shape character was central to Greek thought. Socrates questioned his students not to give them answers but to awaken their minds. Plato founded the Academy, the ancestor of the modern university. Aristotle's Lyceum was more than a school. It was a vision of knowledge as a network, with each subject connected to the whole. Every syllabus, every debate, every library owes something to this Greek conviction that learning is not a luxury, but a necessity of human life. Yet, as inspiring as this legacy is, Greece also faces the challenge of preservation. Earthquakes, pollution, and mass tourism threaten ancient sites. The treasures of Greece are scattered across the world, from the British Museum in London to the Louvre in Paris, raising questions about cultural ownership and heritage. The future of Greece depends not only on what it created long ago, but on how the modern world chooses to respect and protect it. Will future generations still walk through the agora of Athens, or will it fade under the weight of neglect? The answer is not only Greece's to give. It belongs to all humanity. Today, Greece is a modern nation with the same concerns as many others: economic stability, political participation, and global partnerships. Yet its position is unique. Few other countries carry such a powerful double identity, both a small Mediterranean nation and a guardian of a civilization that belongs to everyone. This dual role gives Greece both pride and responsibility. It cannot retreat into the past, nor can it abandon it. Instead, it must live in dialogue with its history, finding ways to keep it relevant without trapping itself in nostalgia. In the 21st century, the Greek spirit continues to move the world. Philosophers revisit Plato when debating ethics in artificial intelligence. Politicians quote Pericles when speaking about democracy. Scientists admire Archimedes when designing new principles of engineering. Artists borrow from Greek myths to tell timeless human stories in books, films, and paintings. Even the Olympic Games, born in ancient Olympia, remain a global symbol of unity. Every 4 years, athletes gather not merely to compete, but to honor an ideal that began in Greek soil, the celebration of human excellence and peaceful rivalry. What gives Greece its lasting power is not only its answers, but its questions. Socrates asked, "What is justice?" Plato asked, "What is the good life?" Aristotle asked, "What is truth?" These questions remain unresolved, and perhaps they always will. But it is precisely this openness, this willingness to explore without final closure, that keeps Greek thought alive. As long as humans wonder about meaning, justice, truth, and beauty, Greece will remain a companion on that journey. So, what of the future? Greece stands at a crossroads, just as it often did in its history. The challenges of climate change, globalization, and cultural preservation are real. Yet the very adaptability of Greek civilization in the past offers hope for the future. Just as Greece once absorbed influences from Egypt, Persia, and Rome, it can continue to blend tradition with innovation. New generations of Greeks are using technology to preserve their heritage digitally, creating virtual tours of archaeological sites and translating ancient texts into forms accessible to all. This fusion of past and present shows that Greece's story is not ending, it is evolving. Ultimately, the heritage of Greece belongs not only to Greece, but to the world. It is a reminder that human civilization is a tapestry woven from many threads, each contributing color and strength. Greece's thread happens to be one of the brightest, and it continues to shine across centuries. In classrooms, parliaments, theaters, laboratories, and public squares, the voice of Greece can still be heard. It is not the loud voice of conquest or empire, but the steady voice of inquiry, balance, and imagination. From its rocky beginnings among scattered city-states to its transformation into a cultural beacon for the world, Greece has shown that greatness is not measured by size or by power alone, but by the ability to create something that endures. Its heritage reminds us that ideas matter, that beauty has meaning, and that humanity is always capable of growth. Its future challenges us to protect and honor this legacy, not as a relic of the past, but as a living companion for the present and the years to come. The ruins may stand still, but the spirit of Greece continues to walk beside us, inviting us, as Socrates once did, to question, to wonder, and to seek wisdom in every corner of our lives. And so, our journey through the rise of ancient Greece comes to an end, but the story itself never truly finishes. From the myths of Olympus to the birth of democracy, from the wisdom of philosophers to the marvels of art and science, Greece continues to shape the way we live, think, and dream. Its heritage belongs not only to the past, but to the present, and to every future generation willing to listen to its voice. If you enjoyed walking through history with us, don't let the story stop here. Subscribe to our channel for more timeless journeys into the past. Like this video if the spirit of Greece inspired you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which part of ancient Greek history amazed you the most? Together, let's keep history alive, not as something distant, but as a living source of wisdom for today.